So welcome, everyone. I'm Deb Miller, and Reverend Laura and I would like to welcome you to our worship. Please feel free to participate in our service however you are comfortable. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me welcome you and tell you about our worship service and our congregation. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe we are all connected in this world, and we value the worth and dignity of each person. We pull on the wisdom of many sources to teach us, guide us, and help us understand this world. We welcome all, young or old, regardless of ethnicity, sexual orientation, religious background, or physical ability. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, we welcome you. Today we are asking that masks be worn for the services at Omi Gardens both this week and next. This recommendation is considered the best way to keep our unvaccinated members safe as we gather together as a fellowship for the first time in over a year. Thank you for your understanding of this request. Whether you have undergone COVID vaccine yourself, have opted out, or are unable to receive a vaccination at this time. Thank you for your understanding of our request. Today's service is being recorded and will be available on our CUUF webpage after it's edited. It will be edited to not include any joys and sorrows that people speak into the mic, so feel free to be comfortable to share joys and sorrows just like we have in the past. And again, I welcome you all to our service. I'd like to take a moment for our land acknowledgement. We gather on the homeland of the Pesquosa, land spanning from the banks of the Columbia to the Cascade Mountains. As many as 2,000 Pesquosa lived here for generations upon generations and were the stewards of this land. The Pesquosa people still live here. In the 1855 Yakima Treaty and the confirming cession agreement of 1893, the Pesquosa ceded land to the United States and retained 36 square miles of land at the confluence of the Wenatchee River and Icicle Creek, close to where the town of Leavenworth currently exists. The traditional hunting, fishing, and gathering rights of the Pesquosa were also retained and guaranteed. Over decades, the right of the Pesquosa were intentionally stolen by the United States government through fraudulent surveys and malfeasance and government's refusal to honor treaty obligations. Pesquosa land was illegally transferred to colonists and corporations and to the railroad to build a Cascade Mountains crossing. Hunting, fishing, and gathering rights were tied to the land by the colonists' legal principles of property rights and became unenforceable after these land transfers. Most of the Pesquosa were forced to move this loss of their traditional land and resources. Many eventually relocated to the Colville Reservation. In 2010, the Icicle Creek fishing rights of the Pesquosa were finally recognized. After several decades of political and legal work, the land of the Pesquosa remain unrecognized by the government. The land rights. The Pesquosa continue their traditions and seek to have their homeland restored.
Gotta give you a minute. It's been a while since I've seen you all. Pretty bittersweet right now. I haven't seen you since December 2019 when I left for sabbatical. So let us settle into our space. Take a deep breath in and out. Take a moment to feel what it's like to gather together again. Let your senses open to those around you and those missing. And if you're unable to join us today and are watching the video, you are missed. Cascade UU congregation is no longer the congregation it was even 2 years ago. It would be easy to skim past this and move right into enjoying our gathering today. However, we have a huge elephant sitting right here in the front row. So take a moment. Let your spirit sink into this changed community. Let us acknowledge the loss. Let it acknowledge the bittersweetness, the sadness, and of course, the joy of this moment. Reconnect to why you are a part of this community. Remember what brought you here and what encourages you to stay. May we hold each other tenderly during this transition time. And may we embrace the blessings of gathering once again. Come, let us worship together. As we prepare our hearts for worship, let us remember our connections through our collective chalice lighting words. Please join me. In the light of truth, in the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share. I'd like to invite Connor Dolan and Kimber Bond up front, please. Today we take time to recognize and express our gratitude to Connor for his work as our religious education director and Kimbris for her work as our music director. Connor, thank you for your time and dedication to the religious education of our children, youth, and in this past year, our adults. You brought your own creative spark, and I know you've heard that many times in the time that you've worked here, to each activity you were inspired to do. Thank you for sharing yourself with us, and many blessings on your journey ahead. We're all excited for you. I present to you your own chalice to remember us and to hold us close. Thank you. Kimbris. Thank you for your time and dedication to our music program. Thank you for your patience with all of the creative people and voices in our congregation. Thank you for bringing your enthusiasm to the work that you did for us. It helped people stay engaged and helped keep them lifted. Thank you for sharing yourself with us, and many blessings on your journey ahead as well. And here is a chalice for you as well. You've got some energy. I hope you all will take some time after the service to express your gratitude to Connor and Kimbris. It's important, the work that they did and that they have done for our congregation, and they need to hear it from you, not just from me. Thank you.
The offertory is an ancient element of worship. The act of giving during the service's offertory, regardless of amount, is a spiritual practice that expresses our thankfulness and generosity. We live these values in abundance. Joyfully sharing our gifts and strengths in service to the greater good is one way we create beloved community. You're offering today to support the ministry of this church and to ensure the health and future of our communities, both inside these walls and the world beyond, are welcome. You may drop your offering in the vessel provided. Chris is holding it up in the back. It is the birdhouse that we use during the capital campaign. And if you need any help from the greeters after the service to deposit your offertory, just let them know. We are blessed by your generosity. May these gifts make a difference in our communities through the ministries of this church.
Settle into your seat. Plant your feet firmly on the floor. Relax your shoulders. Take a deep breath in and out. If you are so inclined, close your eyes. For the next few moments, just clear your mind of all your worries. Just let it be here and now. Listen to the sounds around you. You might hear some of the water from the waterfall. You might hear the wind. You might hear the people around you. Breathe in that precious air we take for granted so often. Feel your feet touching the ground. Settle your spirit, your heart, and your mind. Please join me in this settled space for a few moments. Thank you for your presence.
Our first wisdom today is from Tim O'Brien and can be found in Lifting Our Voices, Reading the Living Tradition. Stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. Stories are for eternity, when memory is erased, when there is nothing to remember except the story.
Our second reading also comes from Lifting Our Voices and is from Derek Walcott. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each smile at the other's welcome, and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the loved letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life.
Our final wisdom is a poem from Mary Oliver. When did it happen? When did it happen? It was a long time ago. Where did it happen? It was far away. No, tell. Where did it happen? In my heart. What is your heart doing now? Remembering. Remembering.
You know I can't do this when I preach, right? I need to be amongst you. Oh my goodness. So what's my heart been doing over the last month or 5 months? Remembering. Remembering. I remember in June of 2012 coming to Wenatchee to meet the people of Cascade Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for the first time. I stayed for part of the time with Mary Ellen and John Rundell, and the other part of the time with Emily and Vitek Soroki. I met with so many people and learned about what you wanted and what you didn't want. It was very clear you did not want a processional of the minister and the celebrant at the beginning of the service anymore. And you definitely did not want to dedicate the offering. Those were loud and clear. I remember during that week climbing into Larry's plane and praying to God. I actually had a conversation with God as we were starting to take off, and I said, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. You called me to serve this congregation, and I'm going to trust that you're going to get me back on the ground safely. And of course, Larry did a fantastic job explaining what was happening and what he was doing and all the bumps and the reasons for him, so that helped as well. I remember thinking through the week, I can do this. I can serve this congregation. This can work. However, there was one thing that kept escaping my grasp: the financials. Every time I asked to see the financials, someone would say, I'll get them to you. I'll get them to you. And then I was asked the question, so if the congregation votes to hire you, will you serve? And I said, I have to see the financials. You see, at that time, CUUF was struggling financially. And it was not because of any one thing. There was a succession of 3 part-time ministries that didn't last long enough for them to take hold, and they were also ministers that were living on the west side and commuting over. Some people who were key to the congregation had moved away. Some had health problems, and some did not want a minister. So the financials reflected this. The UUA dues weren't being paid. Church members were cleaning the buildings. Do you remember the sign up and all the things that you would have to check off to do? The director of religious education position was cut, and there were no reserves. The congregation passed a preliminary budget just to get the year started and to hopefully hire a minister that would live in Wenatchee. That preliminary budget was $109,000, and it didn't look like there was going to be any way to increase it anytime soon. So just like Larry's plane ride, I took a step back and prayed. Did I want to put my trust in this congregation? Do they really want me to come and serve? Was this going to be a stable situation for my family? You see, this was the first time I was causing my family to move and take Philippe with me. And as you all know, since it has been 9 years, I decided to trust in you, in my call, and in God, and none of them have let me down. I also remember being exhausted from that week of meeting with people. and not really having time to write the sermon for the coming Sunday. I allowed my boundaries to be flexible, and instead of holding boundaries about Saturday so I could prepare for Sunday, I accepted an invitation to have dinner. Unfortunately, this choice had repercussions on my sermon writing. It's hard to tap into that fickle spirit of sermon writing when you are exhausted. And so, I remember preaching on the Sunday the congregation was going to vote to hire me or not, a pretty mediocre sermon. And I was pretty disappointed in myself. After the service, Chip and Paige Balling took me to the Loop Trail, and we walked. I remember fighting with myself over that sermon as I walked along with Chip and Paige that day. Then we got the call to come back, and you, the congregation of Cascade Unitarian Universalism, decided to put your trust in me and voted to hire me as your developmental minister. And so our journey began. As a developmental minister, I was given 3 goals to work on: worship development, pastoral care development, and figuring out what the congregation's relationship was to ministry. When I arrived in August 2012 to start, I made a plan to get to know you first. However, in the midst of getting to know you, I discovered some other items that needed to be addressed. And I want to make a few things clear before I continue. 1, I did not do this work on my own. I'm going to repeat that. I did not do this work on my own. I provided resources, helped educate, showed options, and walked with you. You all made the decisions and did the work. 2, Cascade UU Fellowship has always had a great foundation, and that did not change when I arrived. The only thing that changed was the need to adapt to growth. I'm going to give you a story as an example. My husband, Don, started his new job in California. He's the IT director of a company that specializes in robotic knee surgery. Now, the company's product and the engineering behind the product is solid. In fact, it's so solid, they're looking at going international. However, the company IT department, the internal IT department, hasn't grown with the growth of the company. It's still using systems that it had when it only had a few employees, for now a company that has over 150 employees. So they have to figure out systems and foundations and ways to put into place to adapt to that growth, to make them more efficient and better at what they do. So this is similar to what I encountered when I arrived at CUUF. One example, we were using individual printers to print orders of service, the newsletters, and to make copies. Do you know how inefficient that is? They broke down left and right. We couldn't figure out which printer was going to be working on what day. So we got a copier printer that then functions for the whole office, that allows copies to be done, and it allowed for more efficiency, and it actually reduced our cost in printing. Leaders were in the mode of micromanaging all areas of the church, and were not able to do the leadership of visioning and planning the CUUF needed. So we learned the difference between being a manager and being a leader. We learned what the board was responsible for, what the minister was responsible for, what staff was responsible for, what committees and teams were responsible for, what the congregation was responsible for. We had hard conversations about how we wanted to structure our congregation. We formed task force to help with visioning and to build dreams. Leadership learned to trust staff, teams, and committees to keep the church functioning on a day-to-day basis. And the congregation learned to trust leadership to guide the path they were walking. Again, that theme of trust. So we worked together on worship, pastoral care, ministry, leadership, administration, and so much more. And then there was another path we worked on together. When I arrived in 2012, the state of Washington and Cascade UU Fellowship were making a decision in November on whether or not to support same-sex marriage. Remember that? I remember having many conversations about the topic, from people who were afraid the building was going to be vandalized, to others afraid of a split in the congregation, to others being hurt by not being supported by the congregation in their LGBTQ identity. Some wanted to hang a banner and have signs, as well as have a message on our highway pulpit. Others thought the church was overstepping their boundaries by telling people how to vote. And so we did what we have often done. We worshiped, and then we gathered for conversation. We talked about the fears, the hopes, the concerns. We answered questions, and in the end, we developed a message to put on our pulpit by the highway. We support marriage equality. Very simple, very direct. I'm happy to say the building wasn't vandalized and the congregation did not split. Instead, after same-sex marriage became legalized in the state of Washington, Cascade UU was featured on the front page of the Wenatchee World for being the place Christina Davitt and Mary Tamaris were able to legally wed after only being domestic partners for so many years. In addition, the congregation went on to support LGBTQIA+ development in the community. We hosted and helped form the Spectrum, which became a local support group for the community. We hosted the first Wenatchee Pride event, which has now evolved into a huge event that takes over Lincoln Park. We were the financial sponsors for Spectrum and Wenatchee Pride until they were able to get their own nonprofit status. And I have had the privilege and honor to officiate multiple same-sex weddings in our CUUF sanctuary. I also remember the hard stuff of that first year. The shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary happened that December. I remember working with our children on a service of hope and wondering if we should go ahead with the service or not after the shooting happened. We did, and it was a healing balm that we all needed at the time to see our young people at the front of the sanctuary telling us about hope. It was also the year a dear and beloved member of the congregation and community died, Rocky Hildum. I remember being mad at people. Yeah, I was. I remember being mad at people. I remember people being mad at me. That's okay. I remember people being mad at me for setting boundaries around visiting Rocky in his last days. And I think that's been some of the hardest work that I've had to do for the congregation, is hold boundaries, and others getting mad at me for doing it. However, I would not change it one bit. Not for Rocky or not for any other people that I've had to hold boundaries for. Because it allows the family and the person who are dying to finally have control over just a little bit of their last days. And those are precious days. The CUUF Sanctuary did not have enough space for Rocky's celebration of life service, so we had it at the Sunny Slope Church, and there were over 200 people there, and we celebrated Rocky's life how he wanted it done. He had it down to the T of every single piece that he wanted and the people he wanted to talk, and we celebrated with chocolate and coffee afterwards. All of these opportunities were great ways to get to know the congregation, and what I really treasured were the one-on-one opportunities. I had listening circles and asked 5 questions. What do you love about CUUF? What brought you to CUUF? When has CUUF broken your heart? What are you willing to do for CUUF? And what do you hope will happen at CUUF? These are the conversations that help build the foundation and the relationship that we have had. It was where trust was built and blossomed. It was where I could not just see a congregation, but individuals. I have been utterly amazed and honored at the trust and faith that you have put in me over the years. To share your personal stories, to be able to walk with you. And I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for letting me journey with you. I remember in that first year writing a love letter to the congregation. We were in the honeymoon stage. It was full of hopes and dreams for the congregation, and some of them have materialized and some have not. However, the love for this church, for this community, is still deeply present. This is a church with a strong foundation of community, of individuals who care about each other and who have taken risks together. We'll continually need to learn to adapt to new growth and opportunities. I invite you to determine where your heart is in remembering. What are your stories of our time together? I really hope that you'll share them with me over the next week as we say our goodbyes. I hope you will look back on the last 9 years with pride in the work we have done together, because I do. Next week, I will share some of my observations and hopes and challenges I have for CUUF. But for now, let us wrap our time together. And let us pray. Spirit of love, we come to you with gratitude in our hearts. We are grateful for this fellowship, for the journey we have shared together, for the community we have built. We are reminded in our stories that we are not alone, nor did we do the work by ourselves. May we let the blessings of this day rest in our hearts. Amen.